The massive alien ships appeared without warning above Earth's space stations, their crystal hulls gleaming like frozen starlight against the black void. For 3 days, they simply hung there in perfect formation, saying nothing, doing nothing, while every government on Earth scrambled to understand what they wanted. When they finally spoke, the message sent shockwaves through every capital city on the planet. 3 alien women, calling themselves Empresses of the Valkyrie Empire, requested a meeting with Earth's leaders. Their faces appeared on screens worldwide, beautiful beyond human comprehension, with skin like polished marble and eyes that held no warmth, no emotion, nothing that seemed remotely alive. Dr. Kim Hana sat in the emergency council meeting, watching these alien rulers deliver their impossible demand. As Earth's top scientist studying alien life, she had dreamed of first contact her entire career, but this wasn't the peaceful exchange of knowledge she had imagined. "Your species possesses something ours has lost," Empress Thyra announced, her voice carrying no emotion despite the gravity of her words. "We offer you a choice that will determine the fate of both our civilizations." The translation devices struggled with concepts that had no human equivalent, but the message was clear: enough. The Valkyrie Empire had once ruled 1,000 worlds, their technology advancing beyond anything humans could imagine. They had conquered disease, aging, even death itself. But in their quest for perfection, they had made a terrible mistake. For thousands of years, they had carefully controlled who could have children and who could not. Only the smartest, strongest, and most beautiful were allowed to reproduce. Generation after generation, they eliminated every flaw, every weakness, every imperfection from their species. They created a race of perfect beings, who all looked the same, thought the same, and acted the same. Now they were dying because of it. "Our scientists have studied your species extensively," Empress Nera explained, the youngest of the 3 rulers. "Humans are chaotic, unpredictable, and genetically diverse. You fight wars over trivial differences. You make decisions based on emotions rather than logic. By our standards, you are deeply flawed." The insult hung in the air, but she continued without pause. "Yet this chaos is precisely what we need. Our computer models show that only human genetic material can restore the diversity our species requires to survive. We need human partners to breed with our elite class." The demand was simple and terrifying. Earth had to provide willing volunteers, thousands of them, to travel to the Valkyrie homeworld and produce children with the alien elite. In return, humanity would receive advanced technology and protection from other hostile species in the galaxy. The alternative was complete annihilation. "We have positioned weapons above your major cities," Empress Vara, the eldest, stated matter-of-factly. "If you refuse our offer, every human settlement will be destroyed within hours. You have 72 of your hours to decide." As the alien transmission ended, chaos erupted in the council chamber. Some leaders called for immediate military action, others begged for negotiation. But Dr. Kim Hana sat quietly, studying the recordings of the 3 empresses, noticing something that made her blood run cold. In all their perfect beauty, in all their advanced technology, she saw something missing. These beings who claimed to be superior to humans lacked the one thing that made humanity truly special: the spark of individual life that showed in human eyes, the creativity that came from embracing imperfection, the emotional depth that allowed humans to adapt and survive. Against impossible odds, these perfect aliens were already dead inside. They just didn't know it yet. As Earth's leaders prepared for the most important decision in human history, Dr. Kim Hana realized that the Valkyrie weren't offering humanity a choice between survival and destruction. They were offering humans the chance to save a dying species that had forgotten what it meant to be truly alive. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 48 hours of the alien ultimatum, registration centers in every major city were flooded with volunteers. Lines stretched for blocks as people clutched application forms, their faces filled with a mixture of hope and desperation. In Seoul, Park Min-ho clutched his worn sketchbook as he waited in line for 6 hours. The struggling artist had been living on instant noodles for weeks, barely able to afford rent for his tiny studio apartment. The promise of immortality and advanced alien technology seemed like a miracle. Around him stood some of the most accomplished people on Earth: rocket scientists, professional athletes, Nobel Prize winners, and tech billionaires. The Valkyrie had set up processing centers that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Massive crystalline structures materialized overnight in city centers, their surfaces pulsing with soft blue light. Inside, alien machines hummed quietly as they performed scans that went far beyond anything human technology could achieve. When Park Min-ho's turn came, he stepped onto a circular platform that immediately began glowing beneath his feet. They're invisible. Energy swept through his body, analyzing everything from his DNA to his brain patterns. The alien technician, a perfect replica of the Empresses but with silver markings on her face, studied the readouts with no expression. "Creativity index too high," she announced in perfect Korean. "Emotional variability exceeds acceptable parameters. Rejected." Just like that, Min-ho's dreams crumbled. He watched as the woman behind him, a software engineer who spoke in monotone and showed no emotion, was immediately accepted. The pattern became clear as the day went on. The aliens wanted humans, but only specific types of humans. Dr. Lee Gina observed the selection process from the scientific advisory panel, taking careful notes as thousands of people were evaluated. What she saw disturbed her more than the alien ultimatum itself. The Valkyrie weren't choosing the best of humanity. They were choosing the most alien-like humans they could find. Artists were rejected for being too creative. Comedians were dismissed for being too emotional. Teachers were turned away for being too empathetic. Instead, the aliens selected emotionally distant scientists, rigid military officers, and calculating business executives. People who suppressed their feelings, followed strict routines, and valued logic over intuition. "This is insane," Dr. Lee whispered to her colleague Dr. Park Soo-jin as they watched another creative person get rejected. "They're choosing humans who act like robots. These aren't the people who made our species successful." The irony was devastating. Humanity's greatest strengths, creativity, emotional intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to think outside established patterns, were exactly the traits the aliens were rejecting. They wanted human genes, but they were selecting people who had suppressed the very human qualities that made them special. In the camps outside the cities, rejected volunteers gathered in growing numbers. Park Min-ho found himself among thousands of dismissed artists, musicians, writers, and freethinkers. They shared stories of rejection, anger building as they realized the aliens didn't want real humans. They wanted human-shaped Valkyrie. "They don't get it," said Kim Yuna, a kindergarten teacher who had been rejected for showing too much compassion during her evaluation. "They think we're broken because we feel things, but our emotions aren't bugs in the system, they're features." The selected humans, meanwhile, were transported to isolation facilities for final preparation. These chosen ones underwent additional testing and conditioning, their schedules controlled down to the minute. They ate calculated meals, followed exercise regimens, and attended lectures on Valkyrie culture. Slowly, they were being molded into something that wasn't quite human anymore. Dr. Lee Gina watched the process with growing horror. The aliens were taking humans and trying to turn them into perfect beings before the journey even began. By the time these volunteers reached the Valkyrie homeworld, would they still be human enough to provide the diversity the alien species desperately needed? The most troubling part was that the selected humans seemed to welcome the changes. They spoke proudly of becoming more disciplined, more logical, more perfect. They looked down on the rejected volunteers as inferior specimens who weren't worthy of this cosmic opportunity. But in the rejection camps, something unexpected was happening. The dismissed volunteers weren't giving up. They were organizing, planning, and preparing for something the aliens never saw coming. If the Valkyrie wanted perfect humans, they were going to be very disappointed with what they actually got. The Valkyrie mothership was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Stretching. Nearly 10 kilometers from end to end, its crystalline hull reflected starlight in patterns that seemed almost alive. As the 200 selected humans walked through its gleaming corridors for the first time, Their footsteps echoed in perfect silence. Captain Song Ki-woo had flown everything from fighter jets to space shuttles, but this vessel made Earth's most advanced technology look like stone tools. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The air felt perfectly clean, temperature controlled to the exact degree, humidity adjusted to mathematical precision. Every surface was flawless, every angle calculated for maximum efficiency. Yet something felt deeply wrong about it all. The ship was perfect, but it was also completely soulless. There were no decorations, no personal touches, no signs that individual beings had ever lived here. Even the quarters assigned to humans were identical boxes, with the same furniture arranged in exactly the same way. "It's like living inside a computer," Song muttered to Dr. Kim Jae-hyun, a physicist who had been selected for his work on quantum mechanics. "Everything works perfectly, but there's no life in it." What the Valkyrie didn't know was that their perfect security had a very human flaw. While they had scanned every selected volunteer multiple times, they had assumed that rejected humans would simply accept their dismissal. They hadn't counted on human stubbornness and creativity. Park Min-ho had spent 3 days studying the loading procedures at the Seoul Processing Center. When massive cargo containers were loaded onto transport ships, he noticed that the alien scanners only checked for life signs in passenger areas. The cargo holds were considered secure because who would be foolish enough to hide in an unheated, unventilated space for a journey across the galaxy? Humans would, apparently. Min-ho had modified an old diving suit with oxygen recyclers and heating elements, then sealed himself inside a shipping container labeled as Earth Cultural Artifacts. Dozens of other rejected volunteers had done the same thing at processing centers around the world. They were artists, teachers, musicians, comedians, and freethinkers, all the people the aliens had dismissed as genetically inferior. The journey to the Valkyrie homeworld would take 30 Earth days. For the first week, the selected humans followed strict schedules provided by their alien hosts. They attended lectures on Valkyrie culture, exercised in sterile gymnasiums, and ate perfectly balanced meals that tasted like nothing at all. Then Park Min-ho made his move. Using maintenance shafts he had mapped during his hidden observations, he began making contact with other stowaways. Soon a network of rejected humans was moving through the ship's hidden spaces, slowly making contact with the official passengers. The breakthrough came when Min-ho approached Dr. Lee Sunmi, a linguist who had been selected despite her occasional displays of humor. He slipped her a small sketch he had drawn during the journey, a portrait that captured not just her face, but her personality, her dreams, and her hidden sadness at leaving Earth behind. "This is beautiful," she whispered, staring at the drawing with tears in her eyes. It was the first time she had felt any real emotion since boarding the ship. Who made this? Soon, Min-ho was secretly meeting with selected passengers, drawing portraits that showed them as individuals rather than genetic specimens. Word spread quietly through the human quarters. The rejected artist was creating something the sterile alien ship had never seen, art that captured the human soul. The change was gradual but unmistakable. Humans began gathering in small groups to look at Min-ho's drawings. They started talking about their lives on Earth, their families, their dreams beyond this cosmic breeding program. For the first time since boarding the ship, genuine laughter echoed through the corridors. Kim Yoona, the rejected kindergarten teacher, organized secret storytelling sessions where humans shared folk tales and jokes from their cultures. Lee Chang-min, a musician who had smuggled aboard with his guitar, began teaching songs to anyone who would listen. The Valkyrie guards noticed the change immediately. They had been expecting the humans to remain calm and orderly during the journey, following their scheduled activities with mechanical precision. Instead, the passengers were becoming more animated, more unpredictable, more human. "Their emotional output has increased by 47%, reported Guard Captain Veltar to the ship's commander. "They are displaying behaviors not seen in the initial psychological profiles." The commander studied the reports with growing concern. The humans were supposed to be perfect specimens, carefully selected for their genetic value and emotional stability. But something was making them act more chaotic, more creative, more alive than the Valkyrie had ever seen. What they didn't understand was that the rejected humans weren't contaminating the selected ones. They were simply reminding them of what it meant to be human in the first glimpse of Valkyrie Prime through the ship's viewing ports left every human speechless. The planet's surface was covered in crystalline structures that caught and reflected the light of twin purple suns, creating rainbow patterns that danced across geometric cities. From orbit, it looked like a jewel floating in space, perfectly beautiful and utterly alien. As their transport descended through the atmosphere, Captain Zhang Qiwu pressed his face against the window, trying to understand what he was seeing. The cities below weren't built. They were grown like massive crystal formations that had somehow organized themselves into perfect mathematical shapes. Towers spiraled upward in golden ratios, connected by bridges that formed complex geometric patterns. Every structure was positioned with mathematical precision, creating a harmony that was both breathtaking and deeply unsettling. "Hey, it's too perfect," whispered Dr. Kim Jae-hyun, the physicist. "Nothing in nature organizes itself this perfectly. It's like they've eliminated chaos entirely." The humans were transported directly to the capital sector, the most prestigious area of the largest city. Their temporary housing was located in gleaming towers that reached kilometers into the purple sky. Each apartment was identical, the same crystal furniture, the same temperature, the same view of the same geometric gardens below. Dr. Lee Jina was among the first to tour the integration facilities where humans would spend the next several months preparing for their new role in Valkyrie society. As a molecular biologist, she was fascinated by the medical technology on display. The Valkyrie had achieved things that human science couldn't even dream of. They had eliminated every known disease, stopped the aging process, and could repair any injury at the cellular level. But as she studied their medical records, a horrible realization began to dawn on her. "Look at this," she told Dr. Park Soo-jin, pointing to brain scans displayed on floating holographic screens. "These are neural activity patterns for the average Valkyrie citizen. Do you see what's missing?" The scans showed brains that functioned with perfect efficiency. Every thought was logical, every decision calculated, every emotional response carefully controlled. But the areas responsible for creativity, spontaneous thought, and individual expression were barely active, not damaged, but deliberately suppressed. "They didn't just eliminate disease," Dr. Lee whispered in horror. "They eliminated everything that makes someone an individual person." Outside their housing complex, Valkyrie citizens moved through the streets with clockwork precision. At exactly 800 hours, workers emerged from residential towers and walked to their assigned positions. There was no rushing, no conversation, no deviation from predetermined paths. Everyone wore the same style of clothing in carefully coordinated colors that indicated their role in society. Park Min-ho, still hiding in the maintenance areas of the complex, sketched what he saw through ventilation grates, but his artistic eye caught something the others had missed. In all his drawings of Valkyrie citizens, every face looked exactly the same. Not similar, identical. They had somehow bred themselves into a single template of genetic perfection. The integration protocols began immediately. Humans were given detailed schedules that controlled every moment of their day. They woke at the same time, ate identical meals, attended lectures on Valkyrie culture, and underwent daily medical examinations. The selected humans, already chosen for their orderly behavior, adapted quickly to the routine. But the hidden stowaways were horrified by what they witnessed. "They're not trying to integrate us," Kim Yuna whispered during a secret meeting in the building's ventilation system. "They're trying to turn us into them. Look at how the selected humans are changing." It was true. After just 1 week of integration protocols, the official human delegates were becoming noticeably different. They spoke less, smiled rarely, and followed their schedules with mechanical precision. Dr. Kim Jae-hyun, who had once cracked jokes during scientific conferences, now delivered his daily reports in the same monotone voice as his Valkyrie instructors. The medical facilities revealed the full scope of the horror. Dr. Lee Jina discovered, that the integration process included neural conditioning designed to suppress emotional responses and creative thinking. The Valkyrie weren't just seeking human genetic material, they were planning to mentally transform humans into perfect copies of themselves. "We're not here to save their species," she realized with growing dread. "We're here to become their species. They want human bodies with Valkyrie minds." In the lower sectors of the city, where maintenance workers and service providers lived, something else was happening. The hidden humans had begun making contact with these worker-class Valkyrie, and for the first time in thousands of years, something unexpected was stirring in the perfect society. Li Changmin had been teaching simple songs to a young Valkyrie maintenance worker named Zexhai. At first, the alien could only repeat the notes mechanically, but gradually, something changed. The worker began adding his own variations, creating new melodies that had never existed before. When Zexhai hummed his new song while working, other Valkyrie stopped to listen. They couldn't understand what they were hearing. Music that wasn't calculated, sounds that came from somewhere deeper than logic. But for the first time in their perfect lives, they felt something stirring inside them that had no name. The seeds, save chaos, had been planted in paradise, and they were beginning to grow. The first crack in the perfect system appeared during what the Valkyrie called optimal pairing ceremony. The selected humans were supposed to stand in designated positions while alien scientists announced their breeding assignments based on genetic compatibility charts. Instead, chaos erupted in the pristine ceremonial hall. Dr. Kim Jae-hyun, the Aho, physicist who had been growing increasingly robotic during his integration, suddenly broke from his assigned position. "I refuse," he announced, his voice shaking as real emotion returned for the first time in weeks. "I'm not a prize bull being sent to stud. If I'm going to have children, I'll choose my own partner." The Valkyrie officials stood frozen in confusion. Their calculations had predicted perfect compliance, but humans, even carefully selected ones, were proving impossible to control completely. Within minutes, other selected humans were stepping out of line, demanding the right to make their own choices about their lives and relationships. In the underground sectors of the city, Park Min-ho had become something of a legend. Word spread through the worker districts about the human who could capture souls in pictures. Valkyrie citizens, who had never seen individual art before, were waiting in hidden lines to have their portraits drawn. "I want to see myself," whispered a young maintenance worker named Lix Ara, the first Valkyrie to make such a request. "Not my genetic profile or my work assignment, just me." When Minho showed her the finished portrait, Lix Ara stared in wonder. For the first time in her life, she saw herself as an individual rather than a unit in the collective. The drawing showed subtle differences in her features that distinguished her from others, a hint of curiosity in her eyes that had never been captured in official identification scans. "Is this really how I look?" she asked, touching the drawing with trembling fingers. "This is how you could look," Minho replied, "if you let yourself be who you really are inside." The portrait sessions became gatherings. Workers would arrive to watch others receive their individual portraits, seeing for the first time that each person was unique. They began noticing small differences between themselves, the way one person's eyes crinkled when they almost smiled, how another held their head when they were thinking. Dr. Kim Hana made her breakthrough discovery while analyzing tissue samples in the medical research facility. The Valkyrie had perfect DNA, flawless cellular structure, and optimized organ systems. By every biological measure, they should have been thriving. But when she examined their brain chemistry, she found something shocking. Their bodies are perfect. "Machines," she explained to Dr. Lee Gina during a secret meeting. "But their minds are dying. The neural pathways for creativity, individual thought, and emotional processing have atrophied from disuse. They're not going extinct because of bad genes. They're going extinct because they've forgotten how to be alive." The most dramatic changes were happening in the education sectors, where Kim Yuna had begun teaching Valkyrie children. Working from hidden classrooms in abandoned maintenance areas, she introduced concepts that had been eliminated from their society for millennia. What would you do if you could be anything you wanted? She asked a group of young Valkyrie during her first lesson. The children stared at her blankly. The question made no sense in their world where everyone's role was predetermined from birth. I mean, Yuna continued patiently, if you could choose your own job, your own life, what would make you happy? Slowly, hesitantly, the children began to explore ideas they had never been allowed to consider. One admitted she liked watching the patterns that water made when it flowed. Another said he enjoyed organizing objects in new ways that weren't part of his assigned tasks. A third confessed that she sometimes wondered what it would be like to travel to places she had never seen. These conversations led to something revolutionary: play. Yuna taught the children simple games, encouraged them to draw pictures of whatever they imagined, and most importantly, showed them that it was okay to laugh when something was funny. The sound of children's laughter echoing through the crystal corridors was like nothing the adult Valkyrie had ever heard. Workers stopped their tasks to listen, drawn to the unfamiliar sound that somehow made them feel warm inside. Some began gathering near Yuna's hidden classrooms just to hear it. "What is that noise?" demanded Supervisor Velkane when reports reached the administrative levels. "The young ones are expressing spontaneous vocal patterns," his assistant replied, struggling to describe laughter in clinical terms. The laughter spread. Adult Valkyrie began making similar sounds when they saw Minho's portraits or heard Li Changmin's music. They didn't understand what they were experiencing, but something deep inside them was awakening after thousands of years of sleep. The integration facilities reported increasing problems with their human subjects. Daily schedules were being ignored. Humans were forming unauthorized relationships, teaching forbidden concepts to their Valkyrie attendants, and worst of all, encouraging individual expression among the supposedly perfect citizens. But the most troubling development was happening in the genetic research labs. Dr. Kim Hana's discoveries were being shared with Valkyrie scientists who were beginning to question their own assumptions about perfection. Some were starting to wonder if their solution to genetic stagnation might actually be making the problem worse. The three Empresses watched reports of spreading chaos with growing alarm. Their perfect world was developing cracks, and through those cracks, something wild and unpredictable was growing. The humans weren't just failing to integrate, they were teaching the Valkyrie to be human. The morning shift change in Sector 7 had always run like clockwork for over 2,000 years. Workers emerged from their living quarters at precisely 0600 hours, walked their assigned routes to designated workstations and began their daily tasks without deviation. But on this particular morning, something unprecedented happened. Zexhai, a maintenance engineer who had been secretly meeting with Park Minho for art lessons, didn't report to his assigned position. Instead, he stood in the central plaza holding a crude brush made from synthetic fibers, painting colorful swirls across the perfectly smooth government building wall. Other workers stopped to stare, their programmed routines disrupted by the sight of unauthorized markings on official architecture. The colors were bright and chaotic, nothing like the calculated geometric patterns that decorated approved structures. Some workers felt uncomfortable looking at it, but others experienced something they couldn't name, a warm feeling that made them want to keep watching. "Individual Zexhai, cease unauthorized activity immediately," commanded a security drone, its mechanical voice echoing off crystal walls. "My name isn't Individual Zexhai," the engineer replied, not stopping his painting. "My name is just Zexhai, and this wall belongs to all of us, not just the Empresses." The statement sent shockwaves through the watching crowd. No one had ever claimed ownership of public space before. No one had ever refused a direct order from security. Most shocking of all, no one had ever declared themselves to be something other than their official designation. Within hours, similar incidents were happening across the city. A factory worker named Morjin began singing while she worked, not the approved productivity hymns, but new songs she had learned from Li Changmin about freedom and choice. Her melody spread from worker to worker until an entire manufacturing floor was humming unauthorized music. In the residential towers, Valkyrie citizens were making small but revolutionary changes to their identical living spaces. Some moved furniture into new arrangements. Others collected interesting objects they found during their daily routines. A few even attempted to modify their standard clothing with personal touches, a colored thread here, an unusual fold there. Captain Song Kiwoo found himself at the center of something he had never expected. A revolution led not by violence, but by creativity. The hidden humans had emerged from their hiding places, no longer needing to work in secret, as growing numbers of Valkyrie openly embraced their teachings. "This is incredible," Song told Dr. Kim Hana as they watched hundreds of Valkyrie gathering in underground meeting spaces to learn about individual expression. "We're not just changing their society, we're helping them remember who they used to be." The Empresses called emergency sessions as reports flooded in from every sector. Their perfect citizens were developing personalities, making unauthorized decisions and, worst of all, questioning the very foundations of their ordered society. "Productivity has decreased by 37%, reported Administrator Prime Veltara. "Citizens are spending work time engaged in non-productive activities. Some have completely abandoned their assigned roles to pursue what they call personal interests." Empress Thera studied the security footage with growing horror. In one video, a group of Valkyrie children were playing a game that had no rules, no predetermined outcome, no productive purpose. They were simply running around, laughing, and enjoying themselves. In another, adult workers were sitting in circles sharing stories about their individual experiences and feelings. "Deploy enforcement protocols," ordered Empress Vara, the eldest sister. "Implement immediate behavioral correction for all affected citizens." But when the security drones arrived to restore order, they faced something their programming couldn't handle. The awakened Valkyrie didn't fight back with violence, they responded with creativity. They painted flowers on the drone's sensors, sang songs that confused their audio processors, and asked questions that their logic circuits couldn't answer. "Why should we follow orders that make us unhappy?" asked a young Valkyrie woman, standing calmly in front of a security unit. "What is the logical purpose of a perfect society if no one in it feels alive?" The enforcement systems, designed to handle rebellion through superior force, couldn't cope with peaceful resistance combined with philosophical questions. How do you arrest someone for the crime of being an individual? Kim Yuna's hidden schools had multiplied throughout the city. Adult Valkyrie were now attending alongside children, learning concepts like imagination, personal choice, and the right to pursue happiness. These ideas spread like wildfire through a population that had been starving for individual meaning without even knowing it. "We didn't come here to breed," Captain Song announced during a massive gathering in the city's central plaza, his voice carrying clearly through the crystal acoustics. Thousands of humans and awakened Valkyrie had gathered to hear him speak. "We came here to teach you something your society forgot, that being alive means more than just existing." The crowd erupted in sounds of agreement, not the measured, controlled responses typical of Valkyrie gatherings, but genuine emotional expressions. Some cheered, others laughed. Many cried tears of joy at finally feeling something real. "You were told you needed our genes to save your species," Song continued. "But you don't need our bodies. You need our chaos, our creativity, our beautiful imperfection. You need to remember that the best things in life can't be planned or controlled." In their crystal palace, the three empresses watched their 10,000-year empire crumble not through conquest or catastrophe, but through the simple act of their citizens choosing to be individuals. The perfect order they had spent millennia creating was dissolving into beautiful, chaotic living freedom, and for the first time in their long lives, they felt something they had no word for: fear. The Valkyrie military response was swift and overwhelming. Elite guard units trained for thousands of years in perfect tactical coordination descended upon the rebellion zones with crystal weapons and energy shields that could deflect any known projectile. Their battle formations were flawless, their communication instantaneous, their discipline absolute. But they had never faced an enemy like this before. In Sector 12, where the largest gathering of rebels had assembled, Commander Kexthul led his troops in a standard suppression formation. The plan was simple: surround the insurgents, demand surrender, and if refused, use non-lethal force to restore order. His soldiers moved with mechanical precision, creating perfect perimeters and establishing overlapping fields of fire. Then the rebels started singing. It wasn't a war song or a battle cry. Li Changmin, the smuggled musician, had taught them a key, simple children's lullaby from Earth. Hundreds of Valkyrie voices joined together, not in perfect harmony, but in chaotic, individual interpretations of the melody. Some sang high, others low. Many added their own variations that had never existed before. The soldiers stopped in confusion. Their training had prepared them for violence, resistance, even negotiation. But no manual had covered what to do when the enemy responded to military force with a gentle song about moonlight and dreams. "Maintain formation," Commander Kexthul ordered, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. Several of his soldiers had begun humming along unconsciously, drawn to melodies their perfect society had never produced. Dr. Li Jina chose this moment to reveal her most important discovery. Standing on a makeshift platform in the plaza, she addressed both the rebels and the confused military forces through improvised speakers that Park Min-ho had somehow rigged from alien technology. "You want to know why your species is really dying?" she called out, her voice carrying across the crystal architecture. "It's not because your genes are broken. Your DNA is perfect, too perfect. You've created bodies that can live forever, but you forgot to give them reasons to want to live." She held up holographic displays showing brain scans and genetic analyses that she had compiled during her research. Every newborn Valkyrie has the same neural pathways, the same thought patterns, the same predetermined responses. You're not individuals. You're copies of the same person repeated millions of times. The revelation sent shockwaves through both rebels and soldiers. Many Valkyrie had suspected something was wrong with their society, but no one had understood the full scope of their condition. "Humans aren't special because of our genes," Dr. Li continued. "We're special because every human is different. We think different thoughts, feel different emotions, make different mistakes. Our chaos is what makes us alive." In the underground districts, Park Min-ho's hidden art studio had transformed into something unprecedented in Valkyrie history. A gallery where individuals could see themselves as unique beings. The walls were covered with hundreds of portraits, each showing a different Valkyrie with their own expression, their own personality, their own dreams visible in their eyes. Word spread through the city about the portrait gallery, and Valkyrie citizens began making pilgrimages to see themselves, truly seen for the first time. They waited in long lines, not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to discover who they really were beneath their perfect, identical exteriors. "Look at this," whispered Morgan, the factory worker who had started singing unauthorized songs. She stared at her portrait with tears streaming down her face. "This person in the picture, she looks happy. She looks like she has hopes for tomorrow." "That person is you," Min-ho explained gently. "That's who you become when you let yourself feel and dream and choose your own path." The gallery became more than an art space. It became a command center where the revolution planned its next moves. But these weren't military strategies or tactical operations. Instead, the rebels organized creativity workshops, storytelling sessions, and music lessons that spread throughout the city like a beautiful virus. The military forces found themselves completely unprepared for this kind of resistance. When they surrounded a group of rebels, the insurgents would respond by teaching them games or asking them personal questions about their hopes and dreams. When soldiers tried to arrest ringleaders, other rebels would step forward, volunteering to be arrested too, turning every detention into a philosophical discussion about individual rights. Commander Kexthul reported back to his superiors with growing frustration. The insurgents refuse to engage in conventional conflict. When we approach with weapons, they offer us art lessons. When we demand surrender, they ask us what makes us personally happy. Several of my soldiers have requested reassignment to non-combat roles so they can learn to paint. The revolution was spreading not through conquest, but through conversion. Every Valkyrie who encountered human creativity began questioning their own predetermined existence. They saw portraits showing individual personalities, heard music expressing personal emotions, and learned that life could be about more than efficient productivity. Captain Song Kiwoo realized that they weren't fighting a war in any traditional sense. They were conducting the largest educational experiment in galactic history, teaching an entire species how to rediscover their individuality. "We're not trying to destroy their society," he explained to a gathering of human and Valkyrie allies. "We're trying to save it by showing them what they gave up when they chose perfection over life." The three Empresses, watching their ordered world dissolve into creative chaos, faced a terrible realization. Their perfect society was crumbling not because it was being attacked, but because their own citizens were choosing something better. For the first time in millennia, Valkyrie were learning that existence without individual meaning wasn't worth preserving. The revolution had become unstoppable, not through force, but through the simple power of showing people what it meant to be truly alive. The Crystal Throne Room had never seen such chaos. For 10,000 years, the three Empresses had ruled from their perfect seats of power, making decisions through careful calculation and logical analysis. But now Empress Thyra paced frantically, while holographic displays showed their civilization, dissolving into what they could only see as madness. "Productivity in all sectors has collapsed," reported Administrator Prime Veltara, her voice shaking with something the Valkyrie had no word for: panic. "Citizens are abandoning their work. Assignments to engage in unauthorized creative activities. The entire economic system is failing." Empress Vara, the eldest, studied reports of Valkyrie citizens painting murals on government buildings, singing personal songs instead of productivity hymns, and worst of all, asking questions about the meaning of their existence. This contamination must be stopped before it spreads beyond containment. But Empress Nera, the youngest of the three sisters, found herself strangely fascinated by the security footage. She watched Valkyrie children playing games with no predetermined outcomes, adults having conversations about their individual dreams, and workers decorating their identical living spaces with personal touches that served no logical purpose. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "we should try to understand what they have found that makes them willing to abandon perfection." "Understanding is irrelevant," Thyra snapped, her perfect composure cracking for the first time in centuries. "Order must be restored. I am activating the purification protocol." The purification system was Valkyrie Prime's most terrible secret: orbital weapons platforms that had been used only once before, during the Great Cleansing, that had eliminated genetic diversity from their species. These ancient devices could target specific traits at the molecular level, removing unwanted characteristics from entire populations. In the past, they had eliminated disease, aging, and physical imperfection. Now Thyra intended to use them to eliminate something far more dangerous: the capacity for individual thought and creativity that the humans had reawakened in their people. Captain Song Kiwoo felt the change immediately. Every human on the planet experienced a strange tingling sensation as scanning beams swept across the surface, analyzing the genetic and neurological patterns of every living being. The orbital weapons were charging, preparing to erase the very essence of what made each person unique. "They're going to lobotomize their entire species," Dr. Kim Hana realized with horror as she studied the energy readings. "The weapons aren't designed to kill. They're designed to remove the brain functions responsible for creativity and individual consciousness." But even as death rays charged in the purple skies above, something extraordinary was happening in the streets below. The revolution wasn't slowing down, it was accelerating. Valkyrie citizens who had never experienced fear were now facing the ultimate test of their newfound individuality. Kim Yuna, the former kindergarten teacher who had become the leader of an underground education network, stood in the central plaza, broadcasting to the entire planet through hijacked communication systems. Around her, thousands of Valkyrian humans held hands, not in organized formation, but in the chaotic, beautiful way that real people naturally come together in times of crisis. "My fellow beings," she said, her voice carrying to every corner, "of the world, we stand at a moment of choice. Our leaders offer us perfection, the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same predetermined lives that stretch endlessly into a future without surprise or growth." The weapons platforms above pulsed with growing energy, their charging sequence visible as aurora-like patterns in the atmosphere. But Yuna continued speaking, her words reaching Valkyrie in every sector of every city. "But perfection is death," she declared. "A perfect circle never grows. A perfect song never changes. A perfect life never learns anything new. Only in our flaws, our choices, our failures, do we truly live." Park Min-ho stood beside her, his latest painting displayed for all to see. A portrait showing not the three identical empresses, but three sisters as they could be, if they allowed themselves to become individuals. One curious, one cautious, one rebellious, each beautiful in their own imperfect way. "Look around you," Yuna continued, as the charging weapons cast ominous light across the crystal cities. "See how much more beautiful the world has become since we stopped being identical. See how much more alive you feel since you started making your own choices." Dr. Lee Gina's voice joined the broadcast from another part of the city, sharing her final research findings. The Valkyrie were never dying from genetic problems. You were dying from sameness. Every species needs diversity to survive, not just in their genes, but in their thoughts, their dreams, their individual ways of seeing the world. The orbital weapons reached full charge, their terrible energy focused on erasing individuality from every brain on the planet. But in the Crystal Palace, something unprecedented was happening. Empress Nera was crying, the first tears shed by a Valkyrie ruler in recorded history. "Sister," she whispered to Thyra, "what if we are wrong? What if we have spent 10,000 years creating not paradise, but a beautiful prison?" The fate of two species hung in the balance as the youngest empress faced the greatest choice in Valkyrie history: preserve the perfect order of the past, or embrace the chaotic beauty of an uncertain future where every individual could choose their own destiny. The weapons awaited her decision, and with them, the future of consciousness itself. The moment stretched endlessly in the crystal throne room as Empress Nera's hand hovered over the activation controls. The purification weapons hung in orbit like deadly stars, their energy focused and ready to erase individual consciousness from every mind on the planet. All it would take was her authorization code, and within minutes perfect order would be restored. But the youngest empress couldn't stop thinking about the children she had seen in the security footage. Valkyrie youngsters playing games that had no rules, laughing at jokes that served no purpose, creating art that followed no formula. For the first time in her 1,000-year life, she had witnessed pure joy. "I cannot do this," she whispered, pulling her hand away from the controls. The words sent shockwaves through the command center. Empress Thyra turned toward her sister with fury blazing in her perfect features. "You will obey the decision of the collective. Individual preference is irrelevant." "No," Nera said, her voice growing stronger. "Individual preference is everything. It's what we lost, and it's what's killing us." The orbital weapons began powering down as their targeting systems lost authorization. Across the planet, humans and awakened Valkyrie looked up at the fading aurora patterns with relief and amazement. The immediate threat was over, but the deeper crisis remained. Captain Song Ki-woo seized this moment to make the most important speech of his life. Standing in the central plaza before a crowd of thousands, with improvised speakers carrying his words to every corner of the world, he offered something no one had expected. "We didn't come here as conquerors," he announced, his voice calm but determined. "We came here because you asked for our help, but now we understand that you don't need us to save your species. You need us to help you remember what it means to be alive." He gestured to the mixed crowd around him, humans and Valkyrie standing together in beautiful chaos. "Look at what we've accomplished in just a few months. You've learned to laugh, to create, to dream. We've learned to think more carefully about the future, to appreciate the value of knowledge and precision." The proposal he made was revolutionary in its simplicity. Instead of humans breeding with Valkyrie to create hybrid offspring, why not create a hybrid civilization? Humans would share their creativity, emotional intelligence, and ability to adapt to change. Valkyrie would share their advanced technology, their incredible longevity, and their capacity for deep, careful thinking. "We can learn from each other," Song continued. Humans can become wiser and more thoughtful. Valkyrie can become more creative and emotionally alive. Neither species has to lose what makes them special. We can both become more than we ever were, alone. In the Crystal Palace, the three Empresses watched their world transform in real time. The rebellion had evolved into something unprecedented, a voluntary merging of two completely different approaches to existence. Park Min-ho established the first integrated art academy, where humans taught painting and sculpture, while Valkyrie, instructors showed students how to work with crystal growth technology that responded to thought and emotion. The results were breathtaking. Sculptures that changed color based on the viewer's mood, paintings that shifted their patterns like living things. Dr. Kim Hana partnered with Valkyrie medical researchers to develop treatments that extended human lifespan while preserving their capacity for growth and change. Meanwhile, her research helped create therapies that could awaken dormant creativity centers in Valkyrie brains without damaging their enhanced logical abilities. Kim Yuna's schools became the model for a new kind of education system. Valkyrie children learned to play and imagine, while human students studied advanced mathematics and long-term planning. Teachers from both species worked together, discovering that the best learning happened when structure and creativity supported each other. The changes weren't always easy. Some humans struggled with the patience required for Valkyrie-style deep thinking. Many Valkyrie found emotions overwhelming at first, needing time to learn how to process feelings they had never experienced. But gradually, beautifully, the two species began to understand each other. 5 years after the near purification, the planet had become something entirely new. Cities still sparkled with crystal architecture, but now they were decorated with colorful murals and filled with the sounds of laughter and music. Valkyrie had learned to modify their living spaces with personal touches, while humans had discovered the peace that came from ordered, contemplative lifestyles. The most remarkable change was in the children. Those born after the integration began. They combined the best of both species, showing creativity and logical thinking, emotional depth and careful planning, individual expression, and respect for community needs. Dr. Lee Gina's final research report became the foundation document for their new civilization. We have proven, she wrote, that diversity isn't just beneficial, it's essential. Not just genetic diversity, but diversity of thought, feeling, and perspective. The strongest societies are those that celebrate differences rather than eliminating them. Empress Nera, who had chosen chaos over control, became the first elected leader in Valkyrie history. Her campaign slogan, painted by Park Min-ho in brilliant colors across crystal buildings, read simply, "Perfect imperfection." The former rebels often gathered in the central plaza where the revolution had begun, humans and Valkyrie sitting together, sharing stories and dreams. They had saved two species not through conquest or genetic manipulation, but through the simple act of teaching each other what it meant to be beautifully, messily, perfectly human. As Captain Song Ki-woo often said in his speeches to visiting delegations from other worlds, "We didn't create a perfect society. We created something much better, a living one, place."